I just realized that the recording wasn't starting, so just so you know, I just restarted the court recording. My apologies. I don't know, as far as on my knowledge, because you know I just got here. As far as my knowledge, my assumption was that this was already a status quo. This has already been distributed. This is already something that people knew. I didn't think of this as a new thing. I thought that this was just a general reminder. I thought this was something that was already, you know,
Well,
a
it
topic.
originated in the grounds committee last year.
Okay.
And I just, nobody really ever pays attention to it, to be honest with you. At least that's my take on it. If somebody wants to talk to somebody, they're gonna talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like it's,
I mean, I guess that's the thing is we would need examples of where this has been, this communication flow has been bypassed and what the outcomes have been and the challenges it's presented. And I think that, you know, in general, you know, as a committee member, if I will generally bring things up to Susan, if I feel it's appropriate for the finance committee, but as a homeowner, I'm going to run amok.
You know, I think we're beating a dead horse here. For formal communications, this is the flow for formal communications. If we make a motion or a recommendation, this is the flow. Obviously, we're all going to talk to each other. I don't know that it justifies too much more effort than that.
I'm kind of in agreement with Will. It's like, I certainly am not worried about anything. I'm not worried about anybody talking to Bill. You know, I have to say that I guess if it were a finance committee thing, I would sure want to know. And I feel like when I know things or find things out, I want you guys to know. So I'm concerned with passing that information down, like, and not keeping it with me, because I feel like, as I was saying to Dawn earlier, our strength as a committee is, you know, our ability to analyze things together, not, you know, any one person having particular information. So, you know, I feel like if there's a formal thing, I'd like to know about it. And I think this is not new. I think this has always kind of been the way things go. And I feel like Nina does. I've tried not to pay attention to things that are super controlling because I find them annoying, but, you know, respect them too. And it's like, okay, you know, all right. If we have formal things, we have a process. You wouldn't want to be in a position where you're going to talk to somebody and you have a great concern and they said, well, have you talked to your chair about it? And then it would be like, well, you know, I mean, it would be a sort of a sign of mistrust in me. And then I would say, okay, well, if that's the case, maybe it's time for somebody else to be the chair.
I'm going to speak now because I listen, and you know, it's two things I want to say. Number one, I thoroughly enjoy running into people and having conversations with them, and that in particular with Nina, because we always find something fun to talk about. I think more than anything else is that this is not meant as a structure, but rather it is a flow. And I think what we all do is apply common sense to it, and I don't think it's meant to constrain communications as much as just say, okay, here's a logical flow, you know. But you know, geez, you know, if a committee member has a question or comment, you know, you use good common sense in making sure that the appropriate people are, you know, informed and aware.
okay. Okay, so I understand where we're headed with this. Thank you very much. I just feel like, as long as I know that, I'm not gonna try and make policy without you. I think we're good.
You're damn right.
Likewise, likewise.
And I have
Um,
no
I-
intention of doing that, so.
Yeah. And I think we all know that, okay, we're gonna run into, each other, we're gonna have good communications. It's good to share ideas. It's good to share thoughts and questions, and that's great. But we got to use our common sense and recognize structures as such. That's all. Enough said from my part.
I just wanted to just say, Brian, just noticed you were here because your hand is raised, and welcome. But I just wanted to let you know that our homeowner comment time is going to be at the end of discussions too. So that's when you'll get a chance to talk. I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you.
Yeah, I just have one quick comment. Because I've come to some of these meetings before, and if you wait till the end, right? I have a question on this right here. At the end, I'm gonna forget that question.
Yeah, I know, but I know, and I apologize. I'll just remind you that it was about, because I didn't let Carol talk, and she had a comment about this also. So hopefully she'll save her comment for the end too, and that'll remind you to talk about it. So, I know I tried to get you to join the finance committee, and there's always that possibility too. But no, I'm just kidding. Okay, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda now.
Okay.
Let's see, what do we got?
Taxes.
Taxes.
Nicole received and forwarded to me late Friday copies of our tax return as well as our reviewed financial statements. And frankly, I haven't had a chance to fully review them, as I know you can well appreciate. But just to summarize, I think the bigger focus is last year. You recall we had significant interest income, and one of the concerns I previously suggested was that we would have a tax liability, and in fact, we do. Between the Fed and state, the total taxes due for 2023 was $105,000, of which we've paid $49,400 in estimated taxes, leaving us with a liability of $56,500. That's after $781 worth of late penalties. I believe that's what they are. We also have estimated tax payments due coming up April 15th of $52,600, of which $42,000 is federal, and the balance is state. So I will be reviewing these with Nicole, and we'll be reviewing with the board. And as soon as we complete that review, we will share them appropriately.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, thank you for that, Bill. I'm not too surprised.
No, and Tara, our numbers weren't far off, were they?
And about the financial review?
The financial review, my cursory review of it shows that it has been completed. Looking at the accountant's letters, and just as I said, I haven't fully reviewed it, but I don't note any exceptions in the correspondence from the accountants.
And you're going to forward those on to us after you've taken a look?
Yes, and the board's had the opportunity to review them. Yes.
So we have the money, is the money in the reserves for that, or is it in the operating?
It's a reserves.
Reserves.
All right, and this next section is reserve study. Any updates on that from Mr. Browning?
So we do have a fun update that they're actually going to start their on-site visit tomorrow.
Ooh,
So they will start looking at all of the reserve components and evaluating their remaining useful life with a full on-site visit this year. So they're gonna start that bright and early tomorrow morning.
wow.
So it was a last minute, usually we get more warning, but they called me this morning, afternoon and said, you know, we kind of have a random break in our schedule and they kind of just want to jump onto Pente before it gets too busy and want to make sure they complete it and do it right. So they'll be here starting tomorrow. So exciting, unexpected news, but exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, very exciting. That's great, Nicole.
Yeah,
So
I was anxious for them to get
got
out
your-
here.
you'll be walking around with them, no doubt. So you'll have a fun day as
Yeah,
well.
for some of it. I won't be here first thing because I actually have financial training with First Service tomorrow, more in-depth financial training. So I'll be here in the afternoon and kind of check up with them and see where they're at. And yeah.
Sounds great. We'll look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Any questions? Anything anybody wants to say about
I
reserve
have
study?
the
Don?
question on the very first thing, reserve study questions, etc. Where it says, what are alternatives to mitigate and so on? Are we looking for alternatives to the standard Browning 2.5% per year escalation, or what other items might be in that?
Oh, I put that in there to just get us thinking about different, well, you know, the siding thing is the perfect example of products that we could use, newer products that we could use that may have longer useful lives. And if we have products that are longer useful lives that comprise the assets we have, then that means it is longer in between times that we have to replace them, which means less cost for us. So the more that we can do things like that, the more we can save money for
Okay.
ourselves.
Understand. And then as part of that, so Browning, we expect that Browning will continue to use his 2.5% escalation.
Oh, absolutely. And, or 3% is usually what he does.
Okay.
Just matter of course across the years. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other, I've got a couple other as we go down further.
So,
Okay.
I have a question in terms of, I mean, I think I made a comment at one point in time about the irrigation line item in the reserves, and that seems to have a lot of things buried in it, like renovation. And the renovation's really about plants and other things. And so I wanted to make sure that those got corrected in this next process, because there's $600,000 or $700,000, almost $800,000 in that piece of it, and it doesn't feel like a line item is very descriptive about what it really is. When it said renovation, it looked like it was irrigation renovation because it's in that line item. But come to find out, it was like redoing all the plants and everything. So I just want to make sure there's 634,000 uncommitted. So I just want to make sure that that gets cleaned up so we can really see what we're spending. And that's not just on irrigation, it's actually on replanting.
We might take a look at the last reserve study and see what lines are included, what GL codes are included in that line. And that might.
Well, it looks like it's 23133. And I say that because that's what's in our lovely new reserve tracker.
Yes, thank you for that, Nicole.
I'm so happy to have
I
it
mean,
back.
what I mean is take a look at the reserve study, the last kind of great big study that Browning did, the last on-site one, and then and we should kind of just make a point of doing
And I
that.
know I pulled them out. I pulled the Brownie GLs that he has, that because they don't typically go, they don't really go in order. Like Nina said, you go under landscaping and
Mhm.
there's plant replacements, there's irrigation, all under that big, what, 1,800, I think it, or 18,000, I think it is. And then all of the individuals are under there. So when I did the reserve tracker, you'll see that I broke them out. So I pulled irrigation out, I pulled the plantings out so that that tracker tracks it a little easier. But when we do the reserve study, I'll see if we can pull them out all together.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a great idea.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
It
I
should
did
be,
think
it should follow
not
the
clear.
reserve, it should follow the study, because, you
Yeah.
know. Okay, and then, Nina, can I just ask you to just sort of keep track of that, take a look at that? Do you have a copy of the last reserve study? Because I can email you one or,
Um, I have one, yeah.
okay. Any other questions?
I have specific or general under Roman numeral 2, or the
Citing?
extended siding life and flipping from 6 to 12 years and
And let me say, Don, that those are just our notes from before that I left in there of just kind of things we want to check in when Browning does the reserve study. We'll go back and see what happened. But under Roman numeral 5, I have our updates for siding and painting. Did you want to talk more about that?
not till we get there. The just a question maybe for Bill or somebody, the comments that I made at the last board meeting I was at to the board about asking if Browning had ever provided a written analysis of the siding and stuff that he had provided verbally. And I know Bill has some, or Will has some thoughts on that, but standing that aside, if the Browning folks are going to be here, I still think it leaves the board of directors exposed if they don't have something in writing from Browning, helping at least provide information of why they made their decisions. And I don't know how far back this goes, but it certainly seems like we are doing things smarter today than we may have historically. We're taking the hit right now at the high cost of repairing siding and fencing, and hopefully that in the long term will pay the benefits that we're suffering now. But I still think that the board of directors is exposed to not having something in writing from Browning about the siding chosen. And I suggest strongly that that be looked into.
Well, Don, have you taken a look at the reserve study that he did 3 years ago? I mean, that he puts a fair amount of detail into that and justifies every decision
Okay. No, I have not looked at that.
Yeah, I encourage you to take a look at that. I'd be maybe if you don't have a copy of it, I can email you a copy or Nicole can, but it would be good for you to see what what it looks like.
Okay.
I think it's important, Don and Susan, that, and Don, you raised some good points, and particularly as we have Browning on site and we're doing a full study, to raise the question and make sure we get some documentation in there. So it goes. Your comments are noted. Okay.
Thank you.
Any siding and painting updates? Bill?
We continue to march. We've asked, I asked project manager, Paul Reeves, to give a full estimate for completion of phase one. Expect to have that shortly if we don't already have it in Nicole's office. And that I think we've got something like 50 units or some more or less remaining in phase one. We've gone out and that requested bids for phase two. Those are just coming in. We haven't had an opportunity to review those yet, but we want to make sure that we're getting, good cost estimates and direction there. So, we're moving forward. When I last ran into Paul and that we're looking at completion of phase one, late July, early August, which is what's consistent with what we said last month. So, but, as Don points out, yeah, we're paying the price today. We're doing a lot more than was anticipated, and hopefully it will pay off because, my observation of the quality of workmanship, and I'm certainly not an expert in any way, but when I look at the level of detail that they're finding and running into from termites and dry rot and all sorts of stuff, I'm glad we're doing it now and dealing with it, because to defer would be tragic. So,
Can you just say again the nature of the product you asked for from Paul Reeves?
I asked him to give me for phase one. Every month we get project updates from him, right? But I asked him to give us a forecast as to what at completion, what's the total expected cost from his on the ground for completion of phase one. That would be the siding, the fencing, and paint.
Okay.
Right, and that's better than Bill Henley, calculating numbers. Let's have the project manager do what I would expect a project manager to do, and let's give it. Then we can ask questions about that.
All right.
So I do have a quick update on the siding spreadsheet. It's ready to go to me to input the information like I did last time by house, so that we can show the percentages of what we've replaced by house. So I'm pretty much ready to go with that. I just need the information from Paul and I can start reloading that. It'll take me a little bit of time to do that. So whenever you're ready, I ran into Paul on the street and I ran into Bill on the street and I ran into Will today. But I did send a formal message out today that I'm ready to go for that again. So,
I've already forwarded that message to Paul
okay,
from you.
thanks.
Great.
So
Okay.
Paul will give you that information, Nina?
Probably Will and I, or Will and then me, either way, doesn't matter.
Okay.
As long as we get it, I'm not.
You have a system. That's the main
Yeah,
one.
it's loosey goosey a little bit. It's okay. We'll work it out.
Okay.
You're following the common sense path, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, we should be in a lot better shape regarding our estimates for phase two and phase three. We clearly were, Browning had clearly underestimated phase one. But given the intensity of the survey, at least I'm hopeful that phase two and phase three, although they're not going to be good news, at least will be more accurate news.
Exactly.
I gotta say, I don't blame Browning too much. I don't want to go too far sideways on this, but it seems like there's so much, only so much you can really project out when you're a guy like he is, and you can't know, what the effective landscape is going to do or irrigation and things like that. So,
There are so many variables,
So many, right?
labor costs, material costs, irrigation, weather, quality of the work, in the previous project. You know, there are a lot of variables, but it was a fairly sizable miss. And this isn't new. I mean, this siding thing has been, I mean, I've been here since 1997, and it's been a perennial problem since 1997. I mean, thank you, Bob Powell. You gave us a gift that just keeps on giving. Well, at least he gave the contractors a gift that keeps on giving.
Now, one of the other things that,
Comment along those lines, that especially since Browning or Browning's people are going to be here starting tomorrow. Isn't that part of what we pay Browning for, is to bring that expertise? I know it's not 100%, but that's what we pay Browning, to bring that expertise and then put in his plan for us or for any of his other customers.
We do, but the degree of inspection this time was much greater even than anything he's ever done in the past.
This time, what's this time?
Well, because Paul and the contractor went house to house, you know, marking places and so on, and they didn't sample, they did every single unit. So it's a much more thorough, and they went up on ladders, and you know,
we're mixing what Paul and folks have done versus what
no, I understand
what Browning is supposed to bring to us, what he's selling to us.
Right, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that what we got from Paul is more thorough than anything we've ever had in the past.
Understand.
So it makes sense for, you know, in this case, for Browning to incorporate what we already know.
one
Yeah,
of the things we have to pay attention to, I have to say, just for our own maintenance, is it seems to me as we've gone around and looked at things that the rain gutters have caused, clogged rain downspouts have caused quite a bit of damage. So,
yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah, and people's private patios and dirt against fences and, you know, bushes planted too close to fences and houses, and, you know, there's just been a multitude of things that have aggravated the situation. I was in an office building this last week that has T111 on it, that obviously hasn't gotten the level of maintenance we got. And just walking up the sidewalk to the office I was going to, I mean, there were literally holes in the T111 you could see just walking down the sidewalk. I mean, the degree of damage was amazing. So, you know, it was just a visual display of what happens if you don't stay on top of it.
Sounds yuck. Okay, how about water? Any updates on water, Nicole?
No, I wish I could have better news. I've seen emails go back between the city of Sacramento and Wood Rogers still. They're still just collecting a lot of data. It's a lot of emails going back and forth with water consumption reports and data, and this is a slow moving coach. So we'll provide more updates hopefully next month. But yeah, no movement. Just a lot of information, data information.
Yeah, alrighty. I don't think we have any old business. I couldn't think of any anyway. New business, February financials. Does anybody have any questions about that? Nicole, is there anything that you want to say about financial or the reserves?
There was one note that I wanted to just notate. I know that in the pool and spa reserve line item, there was quite a large amount in there. And those came from a bunch of recodes that had to be done. So there were invoices that were paid back as late as 2019. So those ones in particular for the pool and spa were from 2019, where they were approved to be coded out of reserves, but the check was cut from operating. So I had the GL, our staff GL accountant that, came to me and said, we need to get these recoded. They were paid out of operating. It's throwing your financials off. So we recoded them out of reserve, which is why you see such a high cost for a pool and spa, which was unplanned. So it's a recode from 2019.
Okay. I thought it was the homeless cleanup or something like that.
No, that's surprisingly not that expensive.
So all we did was move the money from one account to another.
Correct.
'Cause
But
we
it looked
never
like,
ma-
but it looked like it came all out of reserve just right now, but the check was already cut from operating.
So we've already paid the bill, we just moved the money back over to operating.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
How much was that? I didn't hear the number.
Let's see. Well, there were different ones. Let me see. So this one was, I have a couple different amounts here, so you'll have to add them in the financials, but there was one that was 195.74. And then there was ones that were 11,675. And then 1,160.
Yeah, I was thinking it was just about $12,000.
Yeah.
Any other questions about the financials?
I do. Oops. The question I have is, it looks like in our reserve tracker, we're over on plantings already for the
Oh.
year. So, just curious how we're gonna manage that. So we're 9,000 over at this point. So we got a lot of, land or houses that have been dug up and ready to replant. Is that planning on coming out of that irrigation line item?
I think that irrigation line item, if you read the line item description, says irrigation and remediation. And
Mhm.
that's what the intent is.
Okay, so do you think that's the remediation? So we have 600 grand that we're gonna spend on those remediations this year?
I'm not saying we're gonna spend all of that, no.
Okay,
That's
Okay.
the projection.
yeah, I see that, yeah.
Just because it's in the reserve and says it's there, as Don points out, we don't have to spend it. We gotta look at it, we gotta say, does this make sense? And believe me, and Nicole will attest to this, I'm sure. As we're looking at these, I am asking the question of where is this and what is it and why?
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nicole, I just have to tell you, thank you so much for this reserve tracker. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but I'm very happy to see it. I think it's a great tool and thank you for putting it together.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. And I have the back end where I keep track, in my own binder and all the fun
Mhm.
math and the numbers on my end, and then give you guys the clean, pretty copy. But if you have any questions regarding those line items and want them broken out more, please feel to reach out and I'm happy to assist with that.
Thank you.
Of
Yeah.
course.
It's just so nice to have everything make sense and be
Yeah.
kind of clearly relating to financials and stuff. So good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we go away, I've got a couple of questions about the fencing and the structural repairs, those two line items on the reserve tracker.
Mhm.
If I add the fencing and the structural repairs just together for the 2023 actuals, I come up with $1,781,000. And if I do the same thing for 24 projected, I come up with $1,647,000. So we're about 140,000 less in the plan, I guess, for this year than we spent last year. Where does this put us with regard to what we're spending more than what was in the budget is one question. And the second question is, that 1,647,000 that's in the line here, is that the number that was used in calculating the funding level for the reserve fund at approximately 38% or so? Anybody follow all that?
Yeah,
Are you asking percent funded? You said.
Well,
funded
that's the last thing. The first thing was the actuals here says between fencing and siding we spent $1,781,000, and I said, oh, is that all? Because in the budget for this year, those two items is $1,647,000, so that's about $140,000 less being projected to be spent this year than we spent last year. So is all we're going to spend on the siding and fencing this year $1.6 million? That's quite. I guess that's an easy question. Is that all we're going to spend this year?
well, we don't know exactly what we're going to spend this year,
Well,
but
but that is what's budgeted for this year.
that's what's projected.
All right. Yeah,
I know you hate that, Don.
Well, it's semantic.
I know, but it emphasizes the fact that it's the reserve, let's just call it a budget, just to be simple, is more fluid. That, this is what we think is we're going to spend, and we hope we come under that, really, when it comes to that. And if it comes in over, then we hope that the total of everything we spend comes in under what we plan to spend for everything for that whole year, if that makes sense. So it's like, I think we're guessing a little bit. We're basing our estimates of siding and fencing on what Paul Reeves tells us, and what we knew at the beginning. We know that it might be a little bit more than that, really.
Actually, and Susan, you're absolutely right. And you'll recall during the budget discussions and that we went and the reserve discussions for the siding and fencing. What we did is we said, okay, first of all, phase one is running longer and going to carry into 2024. So maybe we didn't spend as much last year, maybe we spent more. Well, hell, we spent more than what was projected last year. And we expected to start phase two, and I don't remember the exact timings because I don't have them in front of me. But these are projections, and we've projected phase two as a % increase over what the projected phase one total cost was going to be at the time that we were doing the update to the reserve study. And I can tell you right now that with the delays that we've got, the timings and that, and as we go into looking at the reserve study going forward, okay, for 2024, we're going to have some trailing phase one. We're going to have a portion of phase two less than what we expected or projected because we're starting later, and that's going to carry into 2025 and part of 2026 because these are roughly 18-month projects. Now, there are a few less units in phase two, so maybe some time to get adjusted. We'll have to look at that during the reserve study. So it's not just black and white. These were the numbers. They are projections and estimates.
I should know this, but I don't remember it. What was our projection for fencing and siding for 2023?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, that's like me too. As I said, I should know.
It happens, when for us guys that are over 70, it happens, huh?
It was roughly 50% of what we spent.
Yeah, I can tell you that.
We're about 800 grand.
Yeah. It's way under. So,
Okay, and
All
the second part to my question, I guess, let's go to the bottom line here. The 3.8 million for 2024 projection, that was the number that was used to arrive at approximately 38% funding level.
that's the
Nicole,
number that's in the reserve study.
say again, Bill?
That's the number that's from the reserve study, yeah.
Oh, you're talking about to bring something to make it so that our percent funded metric is higher, Don? Is that what you're?
Well, that's an overriding argument to continue on, but what Browning's projection for this year was a funding level of, I think 38% or plus or minus a couple, but approximately 38% funded. And I'm asking that it was at 3.8 million, the number that was used to arrive at that approximately 38% funded.
Not having the reserve study right in front of me, Don, I can't guarantee it, but I'm presuming that that's the number that was picked up.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, if nobody has any more questions, I don't want to cut off conversation, but I was thinking of opening it up for homeowner questions and comments, knowing that we have I know Carol wanted to say something and Brian, so. Homeowner comments, questions?
Yes. So, first of all, you've mentioned a new, or Nicole has mentioned a new reserve tracker, and I'm wondering where that is available for homeowners.
I think it's is it in the board packet?
No, so we haven't have it had as just distribution to homeowners yet. So right now it's just finance committee and board members.
Okay, so when will it be available to homeowners? We are the ones that own it.
I'm not sure if it's going to be dispersed out to homeowners. I will let you know. I will keep you posted.
Okay, and whether it's dispersed out or whether it's located on the website in some form, that would be great. Thank you. Moving on. So what is the current date we're projecting for the update to the reserve study from Browning?
I think, and I'm just going on my memory from minutes of last month. I think they said a draft in August, Carol, because I think it needs to be reviewed and then it has to be approved by like November at the November meeting at the very latest.
Okay, it was my understanding, and I'm talking to Nicole and Bill. It was my understanding that there were some updates that needed, or corrections, or whatever we want to call them, that were needed on his last study that had been missed or forgotten or just not done. And that I would expect that if that were the case, we would see something well before August.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess around May. For that first initial draft. The first draft is probably going to be nowhere close to what the final draft looks like, which is probably around July or August when it finally gets finalized. But yeah, I'm expecting a draft somewhere around May, and then we can start kind of fine tuning it from there, and things that he may have missed or need to be added in. That's going to be that time where we can really go through it with a fine tooth comb and pulling those things out.
Is there a reason that we're not going to see it until May?
Because they haven't drafted it. So that when we see it in May, that will be the first version of the reserve study, the first draft.
Okay, so
there's no study right now to look at. They're going to be on site tomorrow, so there's nothing to even look at yet.
Yeah, but we could amend 2024 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm confused with your question, because if you want to look at the 2025 draft and we don't have that draft yet, what would you like to look at?
Well,
At a 2024 correct view.
I just
Oh,
want,
they're not gonna go back and correct 2024. What's done is done, and that's the final version, but we can move forward and do it correctly.
and I want to point out that the 2024 reserve study was not an on-site visit. I mean, I know you know that because we've been talking about it today. But this every 3 years, this intensive look at all of our assets and judging the remaining useful life in all of our assets is a very kind of intensive labor. And I think a lot of things fed into the fact that last year's was not up to par, not the way we like it. And
I understand that, Susan. But when there are end of the year errors or things that were missed, we really need to get something to look at that better shows us what we are doing in the current year so that we can track that. Because if we're not tracking it, and I'm talking to everyone on the phone, if we're not tracking it, we're not doing our job. We're not doing due diligence.
The point of the reserve study is a future projection.
I understand that, Will. I remember teaching you that when you started on the finance committee many years ago. Thank you.
But
well, I think the point is it's not going to get corrected, so we're going to have to be alert. And sorry, Will, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
yeah, and so going back and changing it retroactively, I mean, yes, if there's things that are missed, they need to be incorporated in the following year's study. But to go back and change the historic document, it's already served its purpose, whether it served it well or served it poorly, it's already served its purpose.
Can I say something to that? I agree with Carol because I think it would give us, I understand the limitations of it, that it's what's done is done, but it would give us a snapshot of how under contributed we, I mean, it was a pretty material mistake, and I'm very disappointed when I look at the finance committee meeting notes that they just sort of glossed over that, that huge error, and they just say that there needs to be some process improvements to, and also, as far as what the cash flow problems, I think that was also brushed over, and the board's not telling homeowners. And then we get this thing like, oh, well, no one goes to the committee meetings, or you've got to go to.
I'm just going to stop you right there, Ashley, because I think you're saying some things that we're not really following. We don't know what you're talking about. Some big.
Okay, well, I'm talking about what Carol's talking about, amending the 2024 reserve study to show, to correct those material errors that were made, just to give us an idea of where we are.
Material
on the other,
I don't want to get into.
You know what, Susan, you keep interrupting me. Can you let me talk?
Because I mean, I'm respecting everybody's time here. We're not going to follow. I think, Nicole gave the response. It's not going to be redone. We already have our projections for the year. And as Will said, it may not be great projection. There wasn't anything huge that was missed. I mean, certainly otherwise we wouldn't have moved forward. So, just kind of casting aspersions on everybody's characters.
So let me move on. And I'm making my comments to board members who are on the call. Especially.
It's not, I'd appreciate it if you just keep it a finance committee thing, Carol. I mean, this isn't meant to be a platform.
Susan, it isn't a you thing.
Do you have a question, Carol?
I was in the middle of several comments. I still am in the middle of them. So what I'd like to say is that to our board members who are listening, that management tools, financial management tools are very important. They're critical to effective ongoing management. Typically, companies have budgets or projections, and they manage those by looking at those either monthly or quarterly to see whether they've made them short or over, whether they've had shortfalls or overages, so that they can understand what's happening to their business. Now, I have one last comment. I know that the board looks at the costs of planting and work orders on occasion in their board meetings. I'm not sure the level of review of the ranking that actually takes place. I know that the board is giving ranking levels for each work order, but it seems as though they don't look at those closely and they just accept everything and vote for every work order that comes through. If we are in a situation where we're not in a luxury mode and we may need to tighten our belts, perhaps some of the work that is at the lower level need not be done, similar to how we've left off some of the less important homeowner requests for landscaping to the bottom of the list and have others that are more important at the top of the list. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Brian, did you have something you wanted to ask? I'm sorry, you had to wait so long.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Yeah, I did have something on that that org chart, but I got more important questions now.
Sure.
So this tax liability issue that we have, what are we doing to mitigate that in the future? Are we working with our people that we're investing with to do some sort of tax planning to mitigate that? Because it was like 100-something thousand that we have a liability for last year. So what are we doing to try to mitigate that in the future?
Well, that's a great question. And with the kinds of investments that we're allowed to make, there are all these very safe, interest-bearing kinds of accounts, CDs and things like that, treasury bills. And so there's not a lot of, they're meant to be minimizing loss and risk to the, we're just not allowed to legally make risky investments. So you can't do a lot of tax moving around. You pretty much, you're happy that I think we made $500,000 in interest income. So out of that, we anticipate that we're going to have to pay, our due in taxes. So there's not a lot of management like the kind that you might do in your personal account by, selling equities that have gone down in value and so forth.
Well, and we, the one thing you could do theoretically is go to munis, but munis are not guaranteed. And so then we have the risk issue.
Right. So in our reporting, and maybe it was there and I just didn't see it, because I remember seeing that huge, gain. Did we show somewhere that this potential loss or this potential liability against it last year? Because I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah, no, it's a good observation because it's not it's not budgeted, if you will. Browning has typically kind of cast our tax liability as it's kind of an offset against inflation. So he never includes like what we're going to actually pay in taxes, thinking that it's going to be kind of absorbed.
Well, he never includes what we're going to make.
He never includes what we're going to make, and he doesn't include
the income. His built-in presumption is that the return on our investment will match inflation, less the taxes will match inflation, and in general, and he calculates that at something like 3% per year, and in general, because they've done like a 30-year overall return on investment and 30-year overall inflation calculation. And the conclusion is that they negate each other out.
Right. Now that's on the projection, but at some point I thought we realized a gain, and I'm just saying, did we also realize the loss? I mean the tax liability. Because I get the projection, right, where it's kind of offset, and I get that. But the other, did we realize
We,
the
we've got a fund for, yeah, we've got a line item for taxes.
you
We
what?
have, during the budget during Bill Himley here, and you know, you're raising a great question. And in fact, it's the same question that I asked when we were putting the budget together. And that because you'll see in the operating statements, I'm closing my mind or closing my eyes and trying to visualize what it was. But there's a line item in the operating statement that says, you know, taxes paid. In the budget process, I said, geez, we got about 500, I forecast about $500,000 worth of interest revenues coming in off of the reserves. And I said, okay, 21% corporate tax liability, Fed, 9% state. And okay, we need to include a budget line item for the cash outflow. Recognize that. And in our processes, and as I learned through the budget process, we don't formally identify that line. It is charged into the reserve. It's charged and funded from the reserve interest. Is there a cleaner way of doing it? Probably so. More visible? Yeah. Was it unanticipated? No, it was anticipated. Okay.
Ashley,
yeah.
sorry, Ashley had a comment in the chat. Ashley, did you want to say something about that?
Oh, well, I just remember that Carla reinvested some treasuries. Remember we sold and we had to sell them, you know, interest rates had gone up, so we sold them at a little bit of a loss. But I don't know if we can write off the, you know, a loss on selling a treasury off of interest income. So maybe Tara or Carol know. But there was,
Right.
you know, and it depends if it's a long-term gain versus a short-term gain, but I think it was a long-term gain. But anyway, something to look at. I mean, the point of that, but I guess going back to, you know, what I was talking about before, and when I was on the board with John and I, John, right before he left, we were really trying to get Browning back to make a correction for how off the siding was, because we wanted a picture of where we were. And Betsy was supposed to do that. And so I think it would be very meaningful, you know, and I feel like homeowners need to know more about what happened with, you know, that error. And I really feel like that error wouldn't have happened. I still think that the finance committee could have been involved in building the operating budget a lot more. I know that there was that issue with getting Browning in, but I think a special meeting could have been called. And I know that you recognize there's some process problems, but I do feel that the communication should be there to homeowners about the error and also about how we've had cash flow problems.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. I think, you know, the finance committee typically is brought in after the fact, you know, once people once they've put the budgets together. Really, it's just like the past couple of years that we've been brought in at an earlier point in time. So, I mean, you know, the board doesn't have to involve us. Of course, we think, you know, we have something to offer, and it is a forum where homeowners can come and hear what's going on. So I think, you know, I think it's good, but it's basically a board decision. So.
But it should be said someplace that it sounds to me like better management of the revenue as well as the expenses tied to taxes and whatever else needs to be implemented. And I thought I heard earlier that there was a line item on the reserve budget for some of this, or maybe it was the taxes, but that's not on the reserve tracker. If the reserve tracker covers everything, I don't, you know.
I
That's
have, I have,
Oh,
I
sorry,
have,
go ahead. Go ahead,
I have-
Brian.
in the conversation, am I to understand that somebody outside of us creates our budget? Browning creates our budget?
He does the reserve study. So that's the thing, you know, and he uses information about costs and expenditures over time and stuff to create this reserve study. But First Service and the board together create the operations budget. So
Okay.
we
Yeah,
have two
but
budgets.
for him to revise, you know, that he has a reserve, or he has an analyst working for him, for him to just revise the error and make a few updates on that spreadsheet for 2024, it's like 3 number entries. I don't see why that would be so hard for him to do. And especially if he's going to be here tomorrow, I personally think that we should get a corrected one and then also be provided a version that takes out that 1.6 million that's being that 3-year project for the irrigation, the turf, whatever that's going to be. And I guess what I'm concerned about, going back to what Nina talked about, is that it feels like, you know, they set aside money for that, but then at the same time, they're doing all this paint and siding, landscaping work. And it's like they commingle things, but then, you know, if they don't use it for that, but then they say, oh, well, we have this money. But I mean, I just feel like there needs to be more separation so they can account for, it feels like they dip into the pots they shouldn't, a little too quickly, and we should be tracking it a little bit better.
I get the sense that it's just messy and you don't like the mess, Ashley.
Well,
I
no, but
No,
because
no,
I track it
totally get
myself,
you.
I know the mess.
I
And
totally
it's
get
easier
you.
for me to do it than
Yeah.
it's just all jumbled up. And then, by the way, when you know, I know the pending's difficult, but there's even a spot on First Services financials where it shows pending expenses. And I'm wondering if there's a way that First Service can book the pending and they just haven't been using that. It's probably an extra layer of work, but I'll find it and I'll email it to Nicole and see if it's something they can do.
The check against Browning and I mean, you know, he obviously made a major underestimate, under projection of this first phase of siding. I mean, that's clear.
We gave him that number.
Yeah, well,
And that was based off of that phony, you know, that horrible estimate we got, unfortunately. But as soon as we figured out it was a problem, John wanted to get that updated so we could just get a big picture idea of how off are we.
Once you've set the year's assessment for reserves, you've made your commitment. The check against that is the financials. If you go back and you compare the financials against the projections, they tell you, in that case, that there was a major mess. To go back and change the original document, you're changing it into something it wasn't. It's a projection, and once the projection is made and you've operated on that projection, to go back and say we're going to change the projection.
Well, but
Yeah,
then maybe we would say, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do this 1.6 million. If we take that out, then that solves our problem. You can look there are opportunities for savings.
Well, yeah, we could take the 1.6 million out and then we wouldn't have the project. I mean,
Well, yeah, but we don't really need the project right now, but that's a whole other, you know,
Yeah, that's
argument.
sort of not our bailiwick, you know.
Yeah,
our
Yeah,
bailiwick
no,
is-
I understand, but I think those types of documents are, you know, good ways for management decisions to be made. And if they're not getting them, then you know, they're going out blindly like, oh, well, we'll just see what happens when we get the report next year, when they could have done something now.
Yeah, but it's too late. It's too late.
It's
I mean,
not too
that's-
late.
It's
not too late. That's
I mean,
what you make changes and adjustments in midstream.
not like
Now,
changing a
what's the
budget for the
proposal? Is the
year.
proposal that you don't you don't update the siding and painting?
Well, the painting and siding, I understand that has to be done and that should be a priority, but maybe some of these, low level priorities. And, by the way, I have the contract for the siding people and they say it's 24 inches. Well, or excuse me, 18 inches, whereas, who's going around the whole neighborhood spouting off, it has to be 24 inches, and we're probably removing a lot of plants and doing a lot of work that doesn't need to be done.
So could
Well,
anybody tell me when this error in projection was discovered?
It,
Over the course of the year? Over
You
the
know,
course
No,
of
I think
last year?
well, there's that big one that was last year because the paint and siding, we got a bad, we hired someone kind of to do a survey and give us a cost, and then they got the bids, but they gave everyone doing bids the wrong information to make the bids off of. So that was a mess. And then the recent mess is, giving the wrong number to Browning, although Browning should have caught it because he could see in his 2023 reserve study what was projected for that. I mean, to me, it's an error that kind of stands out. And so then now
but
we've got
here's-
a
I mean, the thing is
$1.52 million error starting the year.
that, you have to remember that the board is in charge of this and the board is looking at this stuff and.
Yeah, but they don't involve homeowners, and
But
I
that's
think we've
okay.
got a
I mean,
lot of.
that's the
That's
idea
on the
is
board.
that's exactly right. That's when you were on the board, you were making those decisions on behalf of all
Yeah,
of
I
us.
was, and you know
And
what's
they're
interesting
doing it
about that
now.
is, John, we got a letter from Peter Pulkofer about some suggestions of adjustments we can make to our budget. And John, we sat down and went through every item and we actually adopted a few of his recommendations. This is a homeowner. And things.
That's great. It's that, I'm not saying that, it's not great for homeowners to be involved, but in the final analysis, the board is making the decision. And the board used this reserve study to make projections for costs this year. And, there will be always misses in almost every category, and that's okay.
Well, we understand that, but if it's.
Well, I know you understand it because, you were on the board for a couple of years. So of course you understand it. But I mean, the thing is that it's done. The projections have been made. We made our homeowner, our assessments based on that reserve budget.
Well,
It's
I understand that, but we could
years.
still curb our spending a little bit and,
We
you
can
know.
always do that, Ashley. You're totally right. on
Well,
that.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes people need to see it. I guess, I mean, I was fortunate, John, was really good with that and he thought it was valuable to get it updated as soon as possible. Once we found we were off.
It sounds like this issue should now be brought to the board because it sounds like it's kind of past this committee. I
Well,
think that's what I'm hearing.
It's not, this is just like homeowner comments and opinions about things. And it's not anything that's really under discussion by the finance committee, but sometimes it's just good to talk these things out and to give, everybody a chance to kind of process things.
Well, what's going to happen is one of us will say something, we'll write a letter, and then they're going to write some bogus thing in that package, either, trying to embarrass you or humiliate you, saying you don't understand budgets, or like, oh, it's good in some years when you don't spend all the money to go ahead and spend all the money in another category, even though when it's an item that doesn't really need to be spent, like landscaping. I mean, some of the answers have been just ridiculous. Like, who wrote this? And, I'm just saying it hasn't gotten us very far, I guess, when people have made intelligent comments and suggestions.
Well-
There was a comment just a few minutes ago that I want to make sure that it's clear. As a committee, we don't just sit and talk about things. We recommend things to the board. We provide the board with information and ideas and alternatives. The board doesn't just sit there and, we don't talk about it and then drop it. The board doesn't deal with no information from any one of the committees. They use the information that comes from the committee, so it's our responsibility to feed the board our opinions.
That's
I
right.
just want to make sure that
That's
we
right.
will-
That's what we have these meetings for. I appreciate you saying that.
But-
I am just conscious that it's now getting close to 6 o'clock, and I sure appreciate this conversation and everybody's active involvement. I want to check up on the next meeting is I put it down in the agenda and now I forget.
It's April 22nd.
Thank you, Tara. Is that good for everybody?
That was Nicole. She's on it.
It's okay, Tara. We can be the same. That's an honor. I'll take it.
I won't take credit for that one.
Thank you, Nicole. I thought
Yeah, no
I saw the
worries.
tree and you were.
I took
invisible.
your agenda off the screen, so it was my fault.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's easier to see people's squares without the agenda on it. Okay, so April 22nd, next meeting. With that, I think we are good to adjourn. I appreciate everybody's time and being here. All right.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye.